The Marvel Universe is undeniably home to all kinds of supernatural entities, ranging from Spiderman and Ant-Man, who had been infected by insects, to some other more underrated characters such as Jack Russell and Vic Marcus, who were infected by werewolves. While this seems to be a rare phenomenon, the Marvel Universe is actually filled with tons of werewolf characters such as Rahne Sinclair, John Jameson, and so on. Known for transforming at full moon and turning into aggressive entities, the werewolves in Marvel have some unique identities, and today we'll be exploring the 15 wildest werewolves in this universe. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. 1. Jack Russell, Werewolf by Night. Introduced as Gregor Russoff's son, Jacob Russell's origins can be traced back to Transylvania, where his father was highly regarded as a baron and a scholar. He was initially known as Jacob Russoff, and his ancestor Grigory had introduced lycanthropy in their family in 1975 in a desperate attempt to avenge his wife's death and punish the vampire king, Vlad Dracula. Grigory was bitten by one of Dracula's female werewolves, but he was fortunate enough to contain it as his children had already been born, and thus the curse didn't immediately pass on to them. However, things went down the drain when Gregor Russoff got his hands on a copy of The Darkhold and narrated a passage that activated the curse within their bloodline. Even though Gregor was killed by an angry mob, his wife managed to escape to America with Jacob and his younger sibling, Lisa. She then married a man named Philip Russell, and Jacob was then raised in Los Angeles, where he changed his name to Jack Russell around the same time that he turned 18 and discovered that the active curse had transformed him into a werewolf. He soon went on a journey to study his family's origins, which led him to get in touch with the Darkhold in the depths of Castle Russell. He also used his powers for good and ensured that the Darkhold was safe from evil hands, and he typically trapped himself during the full moon to ensure that he did not claim any innocent human lives. Over time, he joined the Legion of Monsters along with Morbius, Man-Thing, Manphibian, and Nkantu, and he briefly even dated Elsa Bloodstone. Just like most werewolves, Jack had superhuman strength, durability, reflexes, sharp fangs, and an impressive regenerative healing factor that allowed him to regrow his head after an altercation with Deadpool. 2. Jake Gomez, Werewolf by Night, 2020s. Also known as Werewolf by Night, Jake Gomez first discovered that he could transform into a werewolf without the influence of a full moon around the age of 13. This ability was passed down to him by his father, and Jake spent most of his early life living with his cousin Molly and his grandmother Rora. While hanging out, Jake and Molly once learned that the Life Pharmaceutical Organization had abducted some tribal people from the Hopi Reservation. They decided to head to the Painted Desert to put a stop to such atrocities, and even came across U.S. Marshals Red Wolf and JJ. Unfortunately, Jake lost control over his werewolf form and jumped to attack the Marshals, after which Red Wolf offered to help him get his powers under control. He even suggested using a Native American supernatural technique from Earth 51920 to control his powers, as his transformations were dictated by his emotions rather than the full moon. While he had powers such as super strength, speed, durability, and an accelerated healing factor and sharp claws, he did not have complete control over them, and he often used a music playlist made by Molly to calm himself down and prevent accidental transformations. 3. John Jameson, Man-Wolf. While Colonel John Jameson was one of the youngest applicants to be accepted into NASA's astronaut program, he soon embarked on space missions that got him in touch with Peter Parker and Tony Stark. On one such secret mission to the moon, John Jameson brought back a glittering red gemstone known as Godstone or Moonstone to Earth, and soon learned that it reacted with the lunar luminescence on a full moon and transformed him into a wolf-human hybrid. He soon became known as the Man-Wolf, and he had a hard time controlling his actions in this state. As the full moon faded, he struggled to get the gemstone pendant off his neck, as it had grafted itself to his skin, and he spent the next few months transforming into the Man-Wolf around the full moon. He unintentionally ended up attacking his fiancée, Christine Saunders, and even got into a clash with Spider-Man, who managed to get rid of his gemstone pendant. However, Michael Morbius recovered the necklace and sent it back to Jameson, and he struggled with this curse for quite some time, especially after he returned to the moon for another mission. Here, he permanently transformed into the man-wolf due to exposure to the moon's rays, and he soon found a portal to the other realm. He discovered that his human consciousness was stored in this dimension, and he even became the successor of Star God and ruled over this realm until he found a way back to Earth. While he continued to transform into the man-wolf, the gemstone started poisoning his body, and Spider-Man then worked with Dr. Kurt Connors to expose him to a radiation treatment that freed him from this curse. 4. Rahne Sinclair, Wolfsbane. Born to a sex worker who died during childbirth, Rahne Sinclair was taken to her father, Reverend Craig, who was a Presbyterian minister who refused to admit that he had a secret child. While Dr. Moira McTaggart ensured that Rahne was reunited with her father, Reverend Craig raised her as an orphan without revealing that she was his own child. He exposed her to a strict conservative moral code and gave her a sheltered childhood, and he was also one of the first people to chase her away after her mutant powers first manifested and transformed her into Wolfsbane. They mistook her for a werewolf and chased her across the Scottish Highlands until she finally fell unconscious and reverted to her human form. She was once again discovered by Dr. McTaggart, who saved her and took her to America so that she could train under Professor Xavier. Soon enough, she became a part of the New Mutants and even embarked on a rescue mission to save Professor Xavier from Donald Pierce and the Hellfire Club. She then trained under his guidance at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, where she established a psychic link with Danny Moonstar, whose powers enabled her to communicate with Rahne even when she transformed into her wolf form. Rahne continued to be a part of the New Mutants for quite some time, until she eventually joined the X Factor, but she soon left the team to return to Muir Island to find a cure for the legacy virus. She was later affiliated with X Factor Investigations and the X-Force, and she had quite a fulfilling story arc as Wolfsbane. Her mutant ability enabled her to transform into a wolf at will. In some cases, she could assume a transitional form that combined human and lupine features. Rahne did not have traditional werewolf features and retained her memory and human consciousness even in her wolf form. 5. Neena Price, Vampire by Night. When Grigory Rusov got his hands on the Darkhold and was also bitten by a werewolf, he passed down the curse to several generations in his family. Over time, Neena Price inherited this curse through her mother's bloodline, and she was also attacked by a vampire who wanted to turn her into an undead. As a result of this attack, her original curse was altered, and she became a cross between a human, a werewolf, and a vampire. Neena was a regular human during the day, but she transformed into a vampire when the sun went down and even turned into a white wolf during the full moon. In this state, she gained a superhuman sense of hearing, deadly fangs and claws, and the entire ordeal was far too overwhelming due to her sharpened wolf instincts. Thankfully, she had access to her father's money and status, which enabled her to cage herself in a zoo or a park so that she would not be a danger to innocent humans until the curse passed. However, she had no qualms about attacking criminals or using them to satiate her vampiric thirsts, and she typically wandered the streets and fed on rapists or thieves after the sun set. She eventually fell into a trap orchestrated by S.H.I.E.L.D. and joined Nick Fury's Howling Commandos on a secret mission for the U.S. government's Paranormal Containment Unit. Here, she worked with another werewolf named Werewolf and also became close friends with Lilith, the vampiric daughter of Dracula. 6. Nicholas Gleason, Wolf Cub. Introduced as a young mutant with a werewolf-like appearance, Nicholas Gleason, or Wolf Cub, was targeted by several anti-mutant organizations from a young age. After he lost his parents, these assassins were determined to kill him, but X-Men Cyclops and Chamber rescued him and enrolled him at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. While he struggled with his feral disposition at the X-Mansion, he eventually ran away and stumbled upon Maximus Lobo, who was determined to recruit him into the dominant species team. However, Nicholas refused to assist Lobo and even assisted the X-Men and the Exiles when they wanted to defeat the dominant species. Over time, he assumed a new identity as Wolf Cub and joined the Paragons squad alongside Pixie, Preview, DJ, Trance, and Match. After the decimation, Wolf Cub was one of the few students who retained their mutant abilities, and he even survived William Stryker's attack on the Xavier Institute. He was then sucked down into limbo by Belasco, where he stuck by other mutants as they fought against hordes of demons and made a swift escape. After the X-Men disbanded, Wolf Cub went to Germany to get his revenge on Maximus Lobo, but he was recruited by the young X-Men in the process. Unfortunately, Donald Pierce pretended to be Cyclops to recruit the young X-Men, and Wolf Cub sadly fell for this trick and died in a fight against him. 7. Maximus Lobo. First introduced in the Uncanny X-Men comics, Maximus Lobo was one of the New Mutants who resembled werewolves, and he ran Lobo Technologies under the guidance of X-Man Archangel. These New Mutants labeled themselves as the dominant species and killed some humans before proceeding to defeat Wolverine and the X-Men. While most werewolves on this list had no evil intent, Lobo stirred up a whole lot of trouble and even created an explosion to escape without a trace. He eventually returned to Earth when the Exiles teamed up with the X-Men to defeat Havoc, while Lobo was attempting to recruit Nicholas Gleason to join his team. However, he soon lost his powers during the M-Day event, and Nicholas Gleason was also quite enraged with him by the end of his story arc after the events of Messiah Complex. 8. Romulus. Known as a descendant of the ancient Lupine tribe, Romulus had allegedly descended from canines instead of primates, according to the theories suggested by the Black Panther. In his early life, Romulus led Lupine armies as they got rid of neighboring human tribes, and he was known for his unparalleled brutality and ruthless efficiency. He did not even spare his own tribe members and enforced absolute loyalty among his ranks. Over time, Romulus' twin brother Remus distracted Wolverine with tales of their origins, while Romulus sneakily tried to harvest adamantium for their own benefit. Over the course of several centuries, Romulus and Remus worked to reign over Rome, pitting their Lupine warriors against other beasts in the Colosseum, but it was only a matter of time before their tribe questioned his leadership. Several years down the line, Romulus came across Wolverine in Madripoor in the 1910s, before collaborating with the Third Reich during World War II. His presence was spread across major historic events worldwide until he finally emerged from the shadows and collaborated with Professor Thorne in developing the Weapon X program. In the modern era, he continued to trick Wolverine until Nick Fury finally told Wolverine all about Romulus's constant attempts at manipulating people from his family's bloodlines. It turned out that his next plan was to establish Daken as the next Weapon X, and Wolverine then managed to put an end to this by trapping him in the Dark Force dimension. Allegedly known as the first specimen of the Lupus sapiens, Romulus had an accelerated healing factor, superhuman strength, stamina, reflexes, and retractable claws, but he also had a weakness to the Muramasa blade. 9. Carlos Lobo and Eduardo Lobo. While Carlos Lobo's story arc was defined by his involvement in the Mexican cartel, Eduardo Lobo was known for other things, such as the time he dated Glory Grant or even returned to life after she accidentally shot him dead. Both these mutants had the ability to transform into humanoid wolves under a full moon, but they were not true werewolves, as their abilities were a manifestation of their mutant abilities and not any other supernatural causes. While they returned to their human form at dawn, they still retained their superhuman agility and night vision to some extent. However, these powers were enhanced to a whole new level in their humanoid wolf form, and they gained acute night vision and superhuman levels of hearing and smell. While they retained their intelligence and were not driven by bloodlust, they were capable of tracking people down by their scent or distant sounds. They also had infrared night vision, superhuman reflexes, agility, and stamina that allowed them to exert themselves physically for up to 3 hours without feeling tired. They also had an impressive regenerative healing factor, which allowed them to regenerate damaged body tissues with enhanced speed and efficiency. And Carlos once even recovered from a gunshot wound in a matter of minutes. 10. Miles Alfred, Vivisector. Also known as Vivisector, Miles Alfred grew up to be an expert in literature after spending the majority of his childhood being neglected by his parents. He finally ended up enrolling at Harvard University, where his mutant powers first manifested when a bunch of bullies targeted him. In no time, he struck them down with his claws and struggled to keep his extreme emotions in check. Miles did manage to get a grip on his emotions in his animal form, and he eventually joined the X-Force mutant team after his original team died in a hostage situation in New York. Unfortunately, the original X-Force showed up at their first press conference and even tried to fight them, and Miles then faced a huge challenge as their new team had to improve their public standing. He teamed up with Fat to break up fights and even fake a gay relationship to gain more support from the public. But this plan ironically backfired as they realized that they had genuine feelings for each other. Over time, Miles fought against Bad Guy with Ecstatics and even went through a hard patch after Fat sacrificed himself to save the rest of the team. He then helped a resurrected Henrietta Hunter avenge her first death, and even took a serum to lose his powers and return to a normal life. However, he did not realize that Dr. Finley intended to give his abilities to a new Vivisector 2, and he then managed to stab this entity in the eye before returning as the original Vivisector. He rejoined Ecstatics and went on several missions with the team until he was eventually killed by Zeitgeist. 11. Vic Marcus, Werewolf. Introduced as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who worked for the Howling Commandos initiative, Vic Marcus, or Werewolf, led an entire team of supernatural entities against opposing forces. His squad included members such as Vampire by Night, Living Mummy, Zombie, Gorilla Man, and even a clone of Frankenstein's monster, and he oversaw their fight against Merlin in England and the Lords of Living Lightning in Afghanistan. While most werewolves on this list transformed under a full moon, Werewolf was affected by the planet Mars, and his lycanthropy was a result of an ancient Roman curse. He could transform during the day and night, and he was also known for traveling on his flying dragon, Grog. 12. Steve Rogers, Capwolf. Introduced as an alternate version of Captain America, Capwolf first transformed into a werewolf with the help of a mutagenic serum. When this serum clashed with his super soldier serum, it transformed him into an entity who could retain his mental abilities even when he underwent a transformation. Thankfully, he found an antidote to this condition soon and eventually ended up in Chronopolis. Even in this form, Capwolf wore Captain America's uniform and wielded his signature shield, and the only special tribute he gained was the ability to leap great distances. 13. Dr. Claudia Russell. Also known as Knickerbocker Knifer, Claudia Russell was a Romanian doctor employed at the Ravencroft Institute in New York in the early 1900s. She suffered from lycanthropy and transformed into a werewolf during the full moon, and she struggled to retain any control over her animalistic urges in this form. She even killed 3 people during one of her transformations, and she turned into an entirely monstrous version of herself as opposed to the human doctor who showed great regard for her patients at Ravencroft. Sometimes she looked away while her fellow doctor, Nathaniel Essex, disregarded ethics in performing questionable procedures, but she decided that she must intervene after Essex took things a little too far. She tried to free a lobotomized patient named Logan, but Essex's helper, Victor Creed, intervened and tried to stop her. This led to an altercation where Logan recovered from the procedure and pounced on Victor Creed, while Claudia also transformed into a werewolf to distract Creed while Logan made a quick escape. Even though Claudia almost killed Creed in the process, Essex cornered her out of nowhere and injected her with a mysterious serum that made her lose consciousness in her werewolf form. He then covered his tracks and made it seem like he had moved back to Romania, while keeping her body in his laboratory so that he could dissect her in secret. 14. Frell, Maria Calisantos. Frell, or Maria Calisantos, was a mutant who grew up in New York City alongside her elder mutant sister, Lucia, and 2 more siblings. After their father abused them and eventually died of a drug overdose, Maria accused her younger siblings of his mistakes, and both of them soon died under mysterious circumstances. While it's unclear if Maria had intentionally killed them, she most definitely killed her mother's boyfriend, Harry Bellinger, when he tried to assault Lucia. Even though Maria was younger than Lucia, her powers had manifested at an earlier age, and she was strong enough to not only kill Harry Bellinger, but also kill her mother in a horrifying turn of events. Soon enough, the 2 sisters left their home to live in an underground mutant community known as Morlocks, where she first assumed a new identity as Frell. She eventually joined the mutant adventurers team known as X-Force and embarked on several missions with them until they had to rescue a government official named Henry Peter Gyrick from the Mutant Liberation Front. Frell held a personal grudge against Gyrick since he had never tried to become an ally to the mutant cause, and the Mutant Liberation Front's leader, Rainfire, then convinced her to switch sides. She soon joined this team and hoped to kill Gyrick, but this attempt was thwarted by the X-Force's leader, Cable, while Rainfire quickly kidnapped Frell. Over time, she maintained a low profile and finally emerged when the New York City police had captured her sister, who then provoked Frell into admitting that she had killed her mother and Bellinger. In exchange for getting Frell to confess her crimes, Thorne was freed by the authorities while Frell was sent to prison. During this time, she discovered that she had been infected with the legacy virus, and she escaped with some other infected mutants to get her hands on isotope E to cure this infection. Over time, her illness drove her to join the New Helions and the X Corporation, which was around the same time that she lost her powers during the events of M-Day. While she lost her powers, she somehow regained her feline appearance, and she went on a mission to the Weapon X compound, where Sabretooth murdered her. However, her tumultuous story arc did not come to an end just yet, and she was soon resurrected by Selene, only to be killed once again when Selene died. She resurfaced years later in the mutant nation of Krakoa, only to die in an accidental explosion at a nuclear power plant. It's important to mention here that although Frell resembles a werewolf, she has more feline features than Lupine. 15. Thorne, Lucia Calisantos. Much like her sister, more feline than Lupine, Lucia Calisantos began her life as part of the dysfunctional Calisantos family and only managed to escape after Maria killed their mother and her abusive boyfriend. The two sisters then became a part of the Morlocks community, but Thorne was soon swayed by Toad's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She managed to recruit most of the Morlocks to follow Toad and even pit them against her own sister. While Cable's X-Force was able to subdue Thorne first, she later asked him for help performing the Ceremony of Lights, a ritual wherein they illuminated the alley to find any surviving Morlocks. Thorne then worked with the X-Force to even capture Maria after she had gone rogue, which was around the time she got her arrested after getting her to admit that she had murdered most of their family. She then took everyone by surprise by striking an alliance with Professor X and joining the X Corporation's Mumbai branch alongside Maria, Warpath, and Sunfire. However, this team did not stay together for too long due to differences between Thorne and Maria, and they went their own ways after saving Professor X from an assassination attempt. Thorne later appeared during the events of M-Day, wherein she had lost her powers alongside most mutants. Surprisingly, Romulus restored her feline appearance, and she was recently spotted playing baseball with other mutants on the Krakoa Island. While Thorne had a head full of normal human hair, her body was covered with a layer of dark fur, and she had the strength and agility of a wild cat. This allowed her to crouch, jump, and leap around easily, and she also had a prehensile tail, enhanced senses, and an impressive regenerative healing factor as a result of her mutation. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we've explored some of the weirdest werewolves in the Marvel Universe, ranging from Jack Russell and Romulus to Maria and Lucia Calisantos. There's no doubt that these creatures bring a unique twist to the existing horde of supernatural entities in Marvel lore, and it's been nothing but entertaining to see these mythical creatures show up in a world full of superheroes. We hope you enjoyed exploring some of the wildest werewolves in the Marvel Universe with us, and do share your favorite picks in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.